Hello and welcome. When David said he wasn't sure which period this was, I'm trying to decide if it's that moment right after recess, right? When everyone's feeling just like that weird sort of energy when maybe you want to run around or fall asleep. I'm hoping that this panel will inspire neither running nor sleeping. It is my great pleasure to be here with Tabata and John. And as David sort of started the conversation off, we're talking about allyship. And it comes at a time where the Jewish community continues to look for allies, where we continue to sort of reel from that moment after October 7th, when we looked around for voices of solidarity, of support, and found few. And so the fact that now, 570-ish days later, we're able to sit on this stage with allies from different political backgrounds, from countries that really couldn't be that much farther apart, and talk about this type of allyship should hopefully be inspiring and also beneficial because they have lessons that they can share with us. So I want to sort of start with a lay of the land because it's possible that not everyone knows as much about politics in Sweden and in Brazil as they do in the United States. And so as we're looking to sort of make comparisons, I would love for you all to give a little bit of the lay of the land. What does support for Israel, support for the Jewish community right now look like in Brazil and in Sweden? And maybe even look a little more broadly. You know, is Brazil indicative of what support looks like throughout Latin America? Is it an outlier? And so on. So Tabata, I'll start with you, ladies first.
Hello, good afternoon, boa tarde a todos e a todas. Julie, thank you so much for moderating this conversation. John, he allowed me to call him this way. It's an honor to be here with you, and especially all of you, especially those who are not from Brazil or Sweden. Thank you for being here and sharing this conversation with us. I come from a very diverse region, which is Latin America, so there is no single position that unites all of us. But there's one common thing, though, which I think is very negative, is that because of the increase in extreme polarization, those lenses have been used to determine whether countries are friends or not with Israel. And regardless of what is the momentary outcome, I think that's very dangerous. You shouldn't defend the right of the people of Israel to live in peace, of self-determination. You shouldn't be doing as best as you can to make sure that students and the population in general, the Jewish community in general, feel safe in our countries because you are in the left or because you are in the right, because you are of that or that other religion. You should do that because that's the right thing to do. That's a moral question for me. And if we think of Brazil, we have so many things in our common history that we should be proud of. I was sure to write down two things that I wanted to share. One is that Oswaldo Aranha, who was a great Brazilian diplomat, he presided the United Nations meeting, if I can call that this way, that was the location where we saw the creation of the State of Israel. And 2 years after, 1949, Brazil was one of the first countries in the world to recognize the State of Israel. And this polarization shouldn't be bigger than that history that we share. So, not to speak too much right now, I know that my government and President Lula and the government in general statements have damaged that relationship a lot in the last few months. But I don't think, and I hope that those statements, regardless of how bad they are, they cannot be bigger than the shared history we have. And again, our personal opinions on today's government shouldn't be mistaken with our moral duty of make sure that people are safe and that they can prosper in our countries, and that a democratic state should have the right to self-determination. So it's a very complex moment in the world, Latin America, and especially Brazil. But I always try to make that point that there are some issues that they should be bigger than this polarization. They should be bigger than our partisan stance. And I do hope we can come to a point where fighting anti-Semitism is not a matter of partisan labor or where you stand in the ideological spectrum. It's a matter of how you stand in front of humanity. So, to start our conversation.
Thank you. John, can you tell us a little bit about public perception and political perception of Israel in Sweden?
And how many hours do I have? So this is truly complex. I mean, like my colleague here just said, it's very polarized, and that's the case in Sweden as well. And in Sweden, it's very much a question about right or left in politics, where the right is very supportive to Israel, pro-Israel, and the left is very pro-Palestinian. It has not always been in that way, and I'm going to give you a little historic lecture here. Because the case is that the Social Democrats that ruled Sweden for 44 years in a row, we were called the only democratic one-party state in the world because of that. And from the very first beginning, they were very good friends with Israel after the Second World War and the establishment of the State of Israel. And our prime minister, that was the prime minister for 23 years, a social democrat, he was actually a very good personal friend to Ben-Gurion. And he went to Israel several times. But then something happened in the 1968, right? You know, the 68 movement. And Sweden, as a neutral country, we were very much aligned with the so-called freedom movements in Africa, with decolonization and so on. And somewhere during that period, Palestine and that case were included in that fight. And our prime minister that came after, the former prime minister that I was talking about, Olof Palme, that was shot, he became a good friend to Yasser Arafat. And the Swedish left became allies to the PLO and Yasser Arafat, and the Swedish Social Democrat, their sister party is Fatah. So you have to know this when you're talking about, and they are the biggest party in Sweden. They have Still today, they are the biggest party, even though my party, the Conservatives, the moderate party, we are in government now, we have the prime minister, but they are still bigger because we have a coalition. So this is a historical case, and so it's a matter of right or left, and just to illustrate this, the former government just about 10 years ago recognized Palestine as an independent state. And our government that is in power in Sweden now, we were the first European country that permanently stopped all funding to UNRWA this year. So you see the difference in policy when it comes, I mean, and we have a very old tradition in Sweden that we often tend to agree when it comes to foreign policy because that's so important for our country, right? But when it comes to this conflict and when it comes to Israel and to Palestine, they are totally different. And on top of that, of course, we have a huge minority from the Middle East, Arabs, Muslims, about 10% of the population, 1 million, is Arabs or Muslims. So, of course, for the left, this is very important voters. It's an important voter group for them. So this is also a dimension.
So I'm struck by something that you both, in sort of describing the situation now, you went back to history. Yes. And I think this is quite rare in general, but I think especially rare considering you're both very young. Is it sort of common knowledge amongst your generation that this is the history of Brazil as it relates to Israel, the history of Sweden as it relates to Israel? And if so, how does that change public perception?
I can try. Well, unfortunately, the debate, what polarization does with us is that it leaves no space for nuance. It leaves no space for complexity. When we talk about diplomatic relations, it's completely possible to defend a two-state solution. It's completely possible to defend the right of the two people to live safely. But when you go to social media, when you go to the ways that Brazilian politics has been working lately, it seems to me, I don't know if you understand that, but that everyone is seeing the world through Cold War lenses, which don't make any sense nowadays. So we are debating the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Brazilians will see that through a left and right Cold War perspective. And I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. This is not the same Russia, this is not the same Ukraine, the left means something else. How come, like, this was 30, 40 years ago. So I think there is a generational change, which not always has to do with age, but like how we see the world, in that there has to be a modern left. I speak as a progressive. There has to be people who understand that fighting for gender equality, fighting against racism, has everything to do with fighting antisemitism. Those are not different issues. They come from the same core values. But when you talk to this old left, I would call, they insist in seeing the world as if there were the colonizers and the colonies. And thank God we are not there anymore. And things have switched, and like things have changed a lot. So I wouldn't say that in general the population is debating this issue with this complexity, because again, social media and all the incentives for hatred and extremism have left no space for nuances and complexities. So in Brazil, we see the same. If you are on the left, you should be against Israel. Not the government, the state, the people. Why? And if you are in the right, you should be for Israel. But again, it's not for the right reasons. It's because someone told you that if you are in the extreme right, that's what you should do. And the danger in that is the instrumentalization that I think we are seeing in the US right now, because that erodes supports. We need the fight against antisemitism to be a supra-partisan fight. Anything that goes contrary to that erodes the support we need in the fight. But it's also dangerous, because if an extreme right leader comes and says, now we switch positions, are they going to switch positions? Because if it's not something that we learn, that we are doing because of our core values, we are like waves that can turn our position depending on what the leader is saying on social media. And that's not how we should position ourselves in such important and matter of life issues as the ones we are debating.
So I do agree that we look upon the world through a Cold War lens. But I don't say that's wrong, because I mean, I'm coming from Sweden. We have Russia as a neighbor. We are living in the Cold War. So, but what I would like to add is that in Sweden we have a view still, and the population has a view on itself, that we are still a moral superpower in the world. We have always been advocating for the UN and so in the third world and so on. And now maybe reality is not, that cannot be our top priorities anymore, because we have a war on our own continent. We have been neutral for 200 years, and after the invasion of Ukraine, we decided to join NATO. So now we are allies with the US as well. That's great. But I mean, that's a huge change also in geopolitics in our corner of the world. So, yeah.
When we titled this session, Allies Around the World, I don't think we were necessarily thinking about it in terms of American allies. But you both, in responding to that question, talked about sort of the role of the United States, the role of American global leadership in fighting for our values and also for fighting for Israel. And John, I'd like to actually start with you as a member of AJC's Transatlantic Friends for Israel, a transatlantic, across-parliamentary organization of parliamentarians from the United States, from Europe, from Israel, from Canada. How important is America's role in this? And what role does it serve as you are maybe amidst some criticism standing up for Israel? And then Tabata, a similar question, you know, what's the role of the United States in the conversation?
I would say it's crucial. I mean, without the United States as the leading military economical power in the world, we are left to our, how do you call it,
I don't know how dark you're going.
Yeah, but I mean, my point is that we cannot make it without the U.S. because it's crucial, the support from the U.S. I mean, without the U.S. in the UN, without the U.S. Everywhere on the global stage, I mean, the rule-based world order that we have had since the Second World War would be over.
Is it the same in the Global South?
No. No, we have a different, not will, but I personally have a different view. The world is changing, and to be very honest, I don't think anyone in this room knows exactly where we'll be in 10, 20, or 50 years. Change is exponential right now. But I keep telling myself that even though the short term looks very bad, I mean, who likes all those tariffs and all these extremisms in both sides? I definitely don't like them. But I like to think that we have the ability to build something better out of all of this. And I'm 31, so I have to believe that because I hope to be around for a few more decades. And speaking as someone who comes from Brazil and from Latin America as well, there has to be opportunities in this mess that we are going through. I don't think the US will be as stronger, globally speaking, after these tariff wars and like everything that the US has been saying to its neighbors, such as Canada and Mexico. But this opportunity will only materialize to my country if we have clarity in what side we stand. And that's a provocation that I make to ourselves. I definitely believe that we are not in the authoritarian side. Those are not our friends. We don't share values. We shouldn't be looking up to what they represent. But to be in the other side and to be a leader in the other side, and not only in fighting antisemitism, but making this world a more just place, looking to the opportunities of sustainability. I'm talking about climate change and other issues. In order to take some leadership, because there's no vacuum in politics. If the US is losing power globally, what I do think might happen in the next few years, someone else will have more power. But if Brazil doesn't have the moral clarity to stand with democracies, to condemn authoritarianism, even when it has a left color, to stand up against anti-Semitism, will not be invited to the table. We won't be leaders in our region. So I think we are in this very special moment in which history is being made in front of us. I cannot tell, only God knows what is going to happen exactly, but I can tell you what I'll be doing in the next few years. I come from a small party in the center left called the PSB. My party is the only party in Brazil right now that has stood against all authoritarian regimes, including Venezuela and Nicaragua. My party is the only progressive left party in my country that stood clearly against the terrorist attacks. And we, of course, we are ashamed and we are sad that we were the only party in the left in Brazil. But there's another way of looking at my party. We were the ones who grew the most in the last municipal elections. I'm working day and night to make sure that we grow, and we grow because we need a modern left. We need to remember people what it means to defend human dignity in all instances, in all of the conflicts that are in front of us. So that's the opportunity I'm seeking. I do think Brazil can have a huge role, such as Mexico and other countries, in leading not only our region, but the whole country, the whole world, sorry. But if we don't have clarity in what side we belong, in what we stand for, we'll be mistaken with the authoritarians. And that is not what I'm working for. I can know for sure what's going to happen? No, unfortunately not. But I do believe that we have some power of making this world we want to live in. And that's a big chunk of how I devote my time nowadays.
Can I please just add, because I hope that you are right. I hope that you are right. But what I'm afraid of is that if the US withdraws from the global scene, we will leave that vacuum to the axis of evil like Iran, like China, right, like Russia, North Korea. That's what I'm afraid of. Not that the global south or Latin America will have more power in the world or can lead the world in, together with other democratic countries. That's not my worries.
John, I want to stay with you for just a moment. Tabata, you spoke so beautifully this morning at the plenary about how Israel and anti-Semitism are used as wedge issues to divide people, to divide the parties, to really gain political support, despite the fact that there are real people and real lives at stake. Thank you for everything that you said. John, is that happening in Sweden? Is it the same dynamic?
Yes, it is. And I would say that when it comes to anti-Semitism in Sweden, we are not very used in Sweden to talk about, because we don't have the same history as the US, we don't have the same history as Brazil. So we are not very used to talk about race as a matter, for example, or ethnicity or religion and so on, because from the very first beginning we have always been a very homogeneous country, right? So we are not used to that, but we have had a very big immigration from the Middle East the last decades. And as I told you before, we have 10% of the population is Muslim, coming from the Middle East. A lot of people coming from Palestine. In our third biggest city, Malmö, we have a huge Arab population. I don't know if you remember the Eurovision Song Contest last year. What happened with the Israeli participant? She couldn't even leave the hotel for 1 week because of security. I mean, this is a case now in Sweden. It's dreadful. And the problem is that we have parties on the left facilitating these opinions or these radical Islamists because they want their votes. So this is happening all the time. And as I said, this is the most polarized debate probably that we have in politics in Sweden. And it's truly dreadful to see.
You have Russia at your doorstep, and this is the most polarizing.
Yeah, because everybody is agreeing that Russia is a threat, right? So that's not even a discussion. I mean, everybody. So even the former Soviet Communist Party in the parliament is in favor of Ukraine and against Russia. So I mean, that's not a problem at all. So. But I mean, you see this all the time, and I have colleagues in the parliament that I not for a moment believe that they are anti-Semitic. But still, I have colleagues in the Committee on Foreign Affairs saying things like, Hamas is like the same thing as Nelson Mandela. The West looked upon Nelson Mandela as a terrorist as well. Why, and he was part of the solution in South Africa. Why cannot Hamas be a part of the solution in the conflict in the Middle East? He's a spokesperson for his party in foreign affairs, in the parliament. His colleague was part of the Muslim Brotherhood. He was a minister in the former government. He had to resign, but still, he got there. So they are infiltrating the politics all over, especially in the left. And this is very, very worrisome because, as I said, I don't think that he's anti-Semitic. But he facilitates those opinions. And he makes himself to a useful idiot. And that's even more scary because the radical Islamists, I mean, the security police, they know who they are, they can control it, I mean, they counter terrorism and everything like that. But what can you do when they are in parliament, having power? That's really, really worrying, I think. And I mean, we also, I went to the breakout session during lunch about the media. And the media in Sweden, they are so biased, it's crazy. And I can tell you, after my trip to Israel with the AJC, I was a victim for a witch hunt from one of the left newspapers in Sweden called Daily Etc. They are crazy, totally crazy. And when I came to the parliament for a committee meeting one day, they had 2 camera teams, and they are attacking me from both behind and in front of me, chasing me into the committee meeting. It was crazy. And then they are I didn't want to comment and give them any interview because I know that's a lost case, right? And then they are writing, I would say, an anti-Semitic article about this trip, saying that I was paid by the Jewish lobby. Like I was bought, like my opinions, I only have my opinions about Israel and what's right and wrong because I was bought by the AJC. That was a narrative. So it's a crazy world.
I'm very glad that you mentioned your experience with AJC's Project Interchange, and of course, with apologies for what you had to go through. And I wonder if you could speak a little bit about, because you were there after October 7th, so when you weren't being chased by witch hunting, agenda-driven media, how did the trip change the conversations? Maybe when you're in the Foreign Affairs Committee, were you able to share what you experienced for the betterment of Sweden's policy or for at least broadening of understanding?
So first of all, I think that is the most meaningful trip I've made in my life. It was really, really touching, and I'm very glad that I had the opportunity, that you gave me the opportunity to do this trip, because that gave me both courage and knowledge to keep on the struggle. Because, as I said, it's not easy. The debate is very polarized. But when the left are screaming and saying a lot of stupid things, I mean, at least I can say I've been there. I've seen it with my own eyes. I met the family of the hostages. I met former hostages. I've seen the kibbutz Be'eri that they burned down and committed massacres. So, I mean, I've seen it with my own words. I heard the testimony. So, at least I can say that. And that gives me also, I think, because, and this is a problem, the persons who truly need to see this and hear this, they are the people that we don't reach out to. But they should go there and see the same things and hear the same things. But at least I can say, I've seen it, I've heard about it, and that helps me, of course, in the debate, to win the debate against them as well.
Thank you. Tabata, I can't imagine, and I hope you'll share with us sort of what it was like for you coming back from Israel as someone who embodies these progressive values, and how to explain that experience to the people in your own party. And did you sort of come up against that same type of experience that John did, of the left-wing anti-Zionism coming at you even from people who are your allies and your partners?
Well, I'm sort of known in Brazil as a champion of someone who can, at the same time, make the extreme left and the extreme right really angry with me. It's a special talent. So people, they are sort of used, and they also know that I also have this special talent of speaking up when no one else wants to. So you sort of get used to the hate. And I say that because I keep reminding myself that what political leaders or extremists in social media say do not represent my population. I represent in Congress a population of 40 million people. That's how many people there is in the state of São Paulo. I come from a very poor community, which means that all the people I work with in Congress, they come from a very different social background when compared to my family. And whenever I'm receiving all those life threats and all those attacks on social media, because I condemn the terrorist attacks, because I went to Israel and I was proud of that and very grateful for that, I keep remembering myself that social media is just one slice of reality. And I had two personal experiences, if I can share. I remember that Dado, who is here, is one of my greatest friends, and he's a leader in the Jewish community in Brazil and in São Paulo. And I remember talking to him after what happened and sharing with him that whereas it seemed to some people that the whole country was against Israel, that was not true at all in the poorest communities. The Sunday after the attacks, I went to Mass. I'm a very religious person. And I saw my whole church congregate and pray for Israel. That's also Brazil. That's also São Paulo. Those voices might not be in the newspapers every day, in the media outlets, or on social media, but they are there. And there are polls showing that the majority of the Brazilian population, they don't have an opinion on the Israeli government because too many things for us to take care on our daily lives, but they have a strong support for the people of Israel, and that's what matters. And there was this was a few months after the attacks when we started seeing antisemitism grow and grow in political spaces in Brazil. And there was this young person who is affiliated to my party who came to me and said, thank you, I feel safe here. He's even more in the left than I am. I consider myself center left. He's like very in the left. But he was saying, if it was not for the work you are doing here, I wouldn't feel there was a space in Brazilian politics for me. And it happened that we were in a meeting. Someone said something horrible regarding the conflict, and I stood up as the president of the party. And after that, I noticed that he was in the back of the room. And that kept resonating with me. It's one person, but it's one person who can aspire to be a politician in my country, regardless of his identity. Because that's the point. I want to help to build a country where it doesn't matter if you are a man or a woman, the color of your skin, if you are Jewish or evangelical. The only thing that matters is that you are a good person, you work hard, and you are giving your best. So I know I'm sounding maybe too hopeful, and I'll finish with that. I have to be, because the fight is so hard. I have to believe we can handle this situation. There is this great writer in Brazil called Ariano Suassuna, and he says something that I think means a lot in this moment, that those who are optimistic, they are fools. Those who are pessimistic, they are just boring people. We shouldn't be having them around. So we should be hopeful realistics. I know reality is really harsh, but we need to be hopeful, because if we are not, how come am I going to wake up next day and do my best to change that reality? So I know things are hard, but there's so much work to do. Like, as humanity, we faced Second World War. We can face what is happening now. And yes, I receive all sorts of life threats and sexual abuse threats and so on, but I work really hard to make sure that those extremist voices in the left, to remember myself, they don't represent the communities I chose to represent. I'm not there to represent them. I'm there to represent those people who come from our community and work really hard to pay their bills and to put their children through education. Right now, they are not speaking very loudly in social media, but they exist. And they, again, they stand with the people of Israel. You can be sure of that.
Thank you for that. I especially appreciated what you said at the start about people being upset with you from the left and the right. AJC as a AJC as a sort of fiercely nonpartisan organization, we get that too, and it always makes us feel like, okay, we're doing it right. If everyone's angry, good. Of course, we like to make people happy too. I have one last question for both of you, and then we'll bring it to you all in the audience for audience questions. Your allyship with the Jewish community, with Israel, is nothing short of inspiring. Do you feel the support from the Jewish community in Brazil and in Sweden? Is this a mutually beneficial reciprocal relationship? What can AJC be doing to show our gratitude for this allyship, knowing that you get threats, that your address is published, and that this is not without cost?
So yeah, of course, we are both facing threats, and I mean, but if you're into politics, you have to be thick-skinned, right? So that's the daily life being a politician especially during these polarized times. But as I said before, no issue, no matter, no question is more polarized than this in Sweden. So of course it's a lot. I've been sent death threats to my home address by mail, and it's in social media, it's emails all the time. But you just shake it off. And maybe it's easy for me to say because I don't have a family, I don't have children, I'm not married. So of course it's easier. But I have a lot of colleagues. They do not. They are too afraid of speaking out for support of Israel against antisemitism in public just because of that. I have colleagues with security with a panic button and so on around me. I refuse to get one because I'm too afraid of pressing that button by mistake. So I have a very funny story. We can take that outside if you want to hear that for after with a colleague that actually did that. And so I mean, but at the end of the day, I have to look at myself in the mirror. That's why I'm doing it. And now I'm going to be a little personal because when it comes to the Jewish community and to Israel, I have a personal story actually. And this is a case. My family belonged to the Swedish-speaking minority in Estonia for hundreds of years. And on my mother's side, they came to Sweden in 1944 during the Second World War after the second occupation by the Soviet Union. Half of the family, they were left behind. They are not with us anymore because they ended in Gulag. Most of them died in concentration camps in Siberia. So I mean, I cannot say that I truly relate to the Jewish community by that, but at least I have some understanding for what happened. And so for me it's about moral, but it's also about I mean the Swedish-speaking minority in Estonia it's almost totally extinguished. They are gone, and this is too sad. And but when it comes to the Jewish community, I have some fellows from Sweden, fellow Swedes here in the room, and sometimes we tend to say, oh, the Jewish community in Sweden is quite small, right? But I mean, we have the biggest Jewish community among the Nordics, the Baltics. It's bigger than in Poland and so on. So it's not small, and they are very important. And this year we are celebrating 250 years of Jewish life in Sweden. And that makes me so sad when I know what they are going through. And I know that people are even moving or thinking about moving from Sweden because they are facing the antisemitism. And this makes me so sad, and this makes me also want to fight even more for this, so yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of work we can do, and I cannot do that work without the help of the Jewish community in my country. I do believe in the power of education. The next generations must be better than us, and I know there's a lot of really nice work being done in my country in that sense. I also believe in the power of dialogue. It's not a matter of coincidence that so many people today mention their trips to Israel. It's really hard to hate someone when that person is in front of you. That's key for us to understand what is happening. That's what social media does, a lot of wonderful things. But it also does some really not nice things, which is distancing people. And I do believe in the power of putting people with different faiths together and exposing people to different realities. But I also believe in the power and necessity of making sure that our legislation is really harsh on hate and hatred and exclusion. So one of the things that I'm doing right now is trying to install this parliamentary inquiry commission to investigate criminal digital crimes against vulnerable people and minorities, including the Jewish community. Because this hate starts in platforms online. Those neo-Nazi cells, they have a life online, and we are not doing anything about it. We cannot treat the digital world as if it was a world without laws. That's what Brazil does right now. So yes, we should give everything we can in education, in promoting dialogue, but also making sure that our legislation is up to date and that this crime cannot keep happening online as if it was not crime just because it's on Discord or on Facebook. It doesn't matter. It's crime all the same. So this is just one initiative, but to say that I do think that the deregulation of the digital world has contributed a lot to the increase of hate speech, not only against Jews, but against women, against the LGBT community. I know it's more complex than that, but again, if we don't have firm laws to make sure that criminals are in jail after they commit a crime, that's a way of saying, go on, nothing will happen to you. So that's one contribution I hope to give, including making sure that our anti-Semitism definition is up to date in Brazil. We need that instrument to fight it. And just in general to say that thank you for your work. I also don't think it's only in the hands or the job of the Jewish community to educate the rest of the world. As a woman, sometimes I'm really tired of having to explain why my men colleagues cannot interrupt me the whole time. So, and I always tell them, study a little bit, there is some YouTube videos, do your job. So that's to say that it's also our job. But I really mean that. I mean, to learn the history, to fact check what we are receiving, to go to Israel, to listen to different perspectives, and to make sure that it's not only the Jewish community trying to make the world safer for them, because a world that's safer for the Jewish community will be safer to me as well, as a Catholic, a non-Jew. So I say that to say that I'm really sorry for everything that has been going on. There are some things in my country that really make me ashamed. But I try to take all of that and transform that thing in energy to work and make sure that Brazil will be better. Maybe not next year or in a few years, but in the midterm. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, we have some time for questions. Rebecca, you want to go? Perfect, brilliant, thank you.
Okay, can you hear me? All right. I wanted to ask both of you about the issue between anti-Israel and anti-Semitism, because in the perspective from each, has anti-Israel rhetoric sort of merged into anti-Semitism, or were they different, and has October 7th been sort of that pivot point in which maybe before that there wasn't, I don't get a sense in either of your countries there was really anti-Israel perspective too strong maybe, or you have a history of being pro-Israel at times, but has there always been an anti-Semitism, and now this has merged with what has become anti-Israel?
The short answer is yes. It has merged into anti-Semitism, and I'm very afraid that, I mean, some parties in Sweden on the left, they've always been pro-Palestinian. But now we can see that we hear more and more voices talking about a one-state solution. And everybody in this room knows what that means in that context. So, I would say that they are neglecting attacks on Jews. They are neglecting the problem with anti-Semitism within this debate. And we all know that every time when it's a conflict in the region, we see an increase in anti-Semitism, in hate crimes, and so on. The last year, or since October 7th, that has increased with 5 times in Sweden, anti-Semitism, hate crimes against Jews in Sweden, reported hate crimes. So, and you can see that all the time in politics, in the debates, and this is the reason why. Because when we are talking about anti-Semitism and Jews in Sweden, the Jewish community and so on, it's almost like for some people, Jews cannot be victims because they are military, a superpower when compared to the Palestinians and so on. And this is a very, very strange perception that I don't understand. But it is there, so I see absolutely a link between those. And that's why it's so important for me in every debate, when I'm debating this question, I always start with some few things. Israel has the right to be an independent state. Israel has the right to self-determination. Israel was attacked on the 7th of October, and Israel has the right to protect itself and defend itself. I always start every discussion about the conflict by those words. And by doing that, I hope someday they will understand the message.
Well, my country has a long history of multilateralism, and Brazil is proud of that history. What means in concrete terms that Brazil over the past decades has been a defender of the state of Israel and its right to self-determination, but also a defense of the rights of Palestinians, and an understanding that those two things needed to be combined. But unfortunately, my country has deviated from that historical position. I could speak hours about that, but I would summarize everything with polarization and what we have been discussed. And that means that both anti-Israel and anti-Semitism they are not new, but they have been increasing exponentially in the last few months. And I wouldn't make a divide between them. Because when we study violence, you see that violence escalates really fast. And for me, it's quite clear that anti-Israel positions are used sometimes to cover anti-Semitism positions and rapidly escalate to very open anti-Semitic positions. And recently, we had one political leader who is very well known in the country defend a boycott. Is that how you say in English? A boycott to business operated by Jews in Brazil. And that's exactly the same thing that happened in the past. And for me, that was crime, openly. And we shouldn't have nuance in that. And again, I was very ashamed. Unfortunately, nothing happened in that. But again, I have never seen someone who is anti-Israel, who deeply is not anti-Semitic. And in my country, anti-Semitism is a crime, and I think we shouldn't bend on that.
Hi, my name's Sam May. I'm a student at the University of Texas. In the US and on my campus and on a lot of other campuses, we're seeing threats of deportation and deportation actually happening. Obviously, there's a need to control the anti-Semitism that's happening and protect Jewish students, but also protecting freedom of expression and not silencing any dissent. What responsibility do elective leaders have to defend Jewish communities while making sure they're not crossing the line into silencing any opposition and getting in the way of basic freedoms?
If I may start speaking about the US, I'm a proud Harvard alumni, and I say thank you. I say that because this whole thing was very complex to me. First, yes, American universities did a terrible job in making sure that Jewish students were safe, and then a legitimate fight against anti-Semitism has become a weapon in the hands of Trump to make sure that his very narrow political agenda is being forced upon intellectuals and universities and so on. And I say that because I agree with you. I don't think that harassing people is a way of confronting the mistakes that were done in the past few years. And I would come back to what I said earlier. I loved the exposures we have with the George Washington University Dean, and I agree with what she said. It's year by year, through education, from the very first beginning, teaching history, teaching very basic human values, how we should live with each other. But at the same time, we also need to have very strict and clear rules that tell us what anti-Semitism is and what a university should do when it happens. That's how democracies work. And bringing it back to my country, we just passed in the Education Commission, it's one of the commissions in Congress, this legislation giving guidelines for deans to have very clear rules on when something is more than just an opinion and what they should do when that happens in their campuses or schools. Because we have seen that many deans don't know what to do because the law is not clear. They have never had to deal with that in the past. So in summary, the instrumentalization of anti-Semitism is dangerous. It's dangerous to all of us. It shouldn't be a partisan issue. We shouldn't make that mistake. But at the same time, we should understand that talking and education, and I am an education activist, is not enough. Criminals should go to jail. Otherwise, they will just escalate, and we'll see what happens. We have seen the past, and I hope we can stop before this time.
So first of all, of course, the right to demonstrate is fundamental. So, but it's about how you do it, right? So we have had a lot of demonstrations in Sweden, but it's also a matter of geography. For example, in my hometown, we haven't seen very much of demonstrations at all in Linköping. And it's a technical university, maybe that's one of the reasons as well, because it's mostly when it comes to the philosophy faculty and so on, and especially in the south, in Lund, that's very close to Malmö, that I was speaking about before. And I think that the deans in the university has been too weak many times, and the government has been very clear that they have a responsibility to make sure that all the students, that includes Jewish students, are of course safe and can go to university and being comfortable with that. So I think this is very important. But I'm not a student anymore. I don't know exactly how it is there at the moment, but I hope it's better now. It's my feeling at least, but yeah.
You know, I share your angst about when you say that without U.S. support, you don't know where you are and you really don't know what our position is. You have to realize we don't know what our position is. It depends on the day. It wasn't that long ago that Ukraine was the aggressor, and you know they started the war, and we weren't unsure about we were going to continue to support Ukraine. Now, before we started the meeting 2 days ago, all of a sudden Putin is a bad guy, and we're going to continue support for Ukraine. I'm here I don't even know what the position is today. So you have to understand that we share your concerns. And it's a very difficult, you know, some people, there are three views of this. One is it's chaos. The diplomats say, no, it's flexibility. And the third one say, it's insanity that's going on.
I like that. That was sort of allyship with our allies. Thank you. Jessica, do you have a question? Perfect. Thank you.
I wonder if you could tell me, in your countries, have you accepted the international Holocaust definition? You have, and in Sweden?
The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance working definition.
We do teach that in schools.
In place.
Yes.
You can.
Can I do something not formally? Fernando Lottenberg, who is a great friend as well, and someone who can speak much better of the show than me, can I ask him to speak for 1 minute?
Yes, please.
He has done that to me in the past, so it's okay.
It's my honor to give my microphone.
Thank you. It was not combined. She did it on.
It's like some revenges from what he did in the past.
Okay, just to explain what the question was, it's about the adoption of the IRA definition by the countries. Brazil, despite of being an associate member of IRA, has not adopted the definition officially yet, and I don't believe it will do in the next month or year. Although some state governments and local governments have done that. So we have 12 states and 2 capital cities in Brazil who did adopt the IRA definition. And more than that, it's being used in legal decisions as a parameter for defining when it happens and when it doesn't. So it has been an important tool, and we've been developing that.
Fernando, can you tell us who you are and your role?
Okay, I am Fernando Lottenberg. I am the Commissioner to Monitor and Fight Antisemitism at the Organization of American States, so 33 countries in the Western Hemisphere. Just to mention the definition, we have 7 countries in our continent that do adopt the IRA definition, 4 of them during our mandate. Thank you.
If I can add one thing. First, I have very smart friends, but second, just before I came here, I made a commitment with Stand With Us, the organization, that I would ask for a meeting with the Speaker of the House, with different members from different parties, to see if we can have that legislation advance, because it has already been presented in the Congress. So that was a meeting I did on Friday. So let's see what happens.
Amazing. Beautiful question, Merle. Thank you, Fernando. Thank you. Brilliant. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. First, thank you very much for your intervention. I'm Angelina from Paris, and I represent the World Union of Jewish Students. Speaking from a French political point of view, it's very refreshing to see profiles like yours who are young, dynamic, progressive, and pro-Israel. We live in an age of high polarization, as you said, and in France, we've had left-wing parties meet the Jewish community with silence or criticism, but we've had the far right wake up with a revival of the Jewish question, unfortunately not for the best reasons. So according to you, in such a context where we do not have a moderate candidate or a moderate party supporting Jewish students, Jewish life, and Israel, how do we make sure Jewish voters choose the right allies? Thank you.
And just before you all answer, that probably has to be our last question. So apologies, I know there were many, many hands up. How do we identify allies?
So I would say that France and Sweden, we have very much in common when it comes to this. We have the same challenges, and it looks almost the same, I would say, when it comes to the context where we meet most of the antisemitism. I would say that, first of all, I want to say that I appreciate Macron very much. I think he's been very clear on this matter, and it's very sad, I think, from my point of view, that he has to step down, because this is the whole Europe. We are worried about what could happen in France if you have two choices, the far left or the far right, and we don't want Le Pen to be, but now she cannot be elected anyway because she's convicted. But I mean, we of course, and France is a very big and an important country as well in Europe. So, and you have a very big Jewish population in France. So I do understand that you are worried about this, but advocate. You have to advocate, and I do think that. I mean, I cannot speak for the French population, but my feeling is that you have a good support from the majority of the French population when it comes to this. So make sure to advocate and to reach out. And of course, because you have a bad turnout when it comes to voting in France, so make sure that they're going and vote as well.
Well, as I mentioned, I have some friends in this room, Nancy, Nina, and the others that I already mentioned, and that's something that we keep discussing, that in Brazil, because of this very complex moment we are going through, it might seem that the Jewish community can only find support in the extreme right, and that's deeply troubling for so many reasons. And one of them is that you shouldn't have to choose whether you stand with the Jewish community or the fight against inequality. I mean, that's crazy. That's what polarization does. And again, I belong to a small to medium-sized party. But I do think it matters that we are there. Because whenever my country goes and say something that I deeply disagree with about Venezuela, to give a different example, it matters that my party is there in the headline saying, oh, we don't agree. We stand in a different way. And to give you a very personal example, but for many months, the national president of my party, Carlos Siqueira, who is a great friend of Israel, in his WhatsApp picture, he had the flag of Israel. He's not Jewish. He just wanted to make it very clear to every journalist and every politician he interacts with that our party has chosen its side and that we will not bend that. And you might think, well, but that's just one party, just like a few people. I don't think that's the case because, again, there is a whole majority that is not speaking up. And yes, when I posted on the anniversary of the attacks, I received a lot of hate. And if you read the comments, you might think, oh my God, I don't want to go to Brazil. But that's not reality. Posts show that. I go to the streets every single day. So if we keep silent, we might make this narrative win that you only support Israel and the people of Israel, the state of Israel, if you are in the extreme right. But we have been very annoying in making sure that this narrative cannot prevail in my country. And also increasing the costs of those who have anti-Semitic positions. We have to increase the cost for them. We have to go to debates, we have to go to the media and ask them to explain. How come it's different to say you want to boycott Jewish-led enterprises now from what happened decades ago? What's the difference? There's no difference. But if nobody in our field speaks up, people keep saying that person, he didn't say he was sorry, but he never repeated that again. So it matters. We might not be so many, but I do think we have this obligation of being the voices. So those who are in silence now, they'll feel more and more confident of speaking up. And again, don't believe this narrative. The majority of Brazilians stand with the Israeli people and the Jewish communities around the world. And I'm sure, I'm confident that with time we'll be able to give those people more and more opportunity to speak up, so you have a clearer and better representation of my country outside of Brazil.
I want to thank our panelists because not only have you really showed us what true allyship and true friendship looks like in this moment amidst cost and threat, but you've also modeled something that we're constantly striving for at AJC, and that's to recognize the global problems and find global solutions. Yeah. Find the solutions that we can all take back to our communities, whether it's Paris or Los Angeles or Washington, D.C., and start to work together and individually to be that change and make the changes that we need to see. So truly from the bottom of my heart, thank you. The Jewish community thanks you, AJC thanks you, and we look forward to welcoming you back to another AJC stage in the future.
Thank you.